I'm Josh Swartz,
And I'm William Illingworth.
hosts of the High Tech Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others.
Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, everybody, and good evening. And thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday evening. That's right, it's a Tuesday evening. As you know, normally we do our shows on maybe a Thursday, or you'll see us on a Saturday morning. But hey, sometimes things line up, things work out great. And I'm just so excited that today we have a wonderful show for you. And we have an amazing guest, and we definitely have an amazing topic that we will be talking about. So thank you so much for those of you that are joining us today, or those of you that will be watching or listening later. Appreciate all your support. But without further ado, I would like to introduce you tonight to our special guest. And one of the things first that I'm going to start off with our special guest is that he was named this year one of the 30 top K-12 IT influencers worth a follow. So you please make sure that you definitely follow Coach Hicks, because he is doing some great things. Coach Hicks, how are you doing today?
I am doing well, no complaints. We are, fresh off getting ready for the evening of the arts and culture. So I'm excited and, looking forward to a restful summer, but I'm doing well.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much again. I know that we had planned this for earlier, probably a different week, but sometimes things line up in a different way. And as you know, I sent you a little message of what happened, and life throws wrenches, life throws nails, and you and I know what we're talking about. But again, thank you so much for being here. And
No problem.
before we get started, please, for our audience members that may not be familiar with your work yet, if you can go ahead and give us a brief introduction and your context in education so our audience members can get to know you.
Absolutely. So I am the founder and director of Coding with Culture, which is a HBCU ready, focus-based, computer science, computational thinking, STEAM, after school program. We offer one-on-one classes, teacher consultations, kind of all things getting, less represented population, specifically African-American children, involved in computer science and STEM. I am also the proud STEM teacher at St. Thomas More School here in Decatur, Georgia, where I teach kindergarten through 8th grade students. And coach of, again, now back to coaching stepping, which is the coach and Coach Hicks. I've been doing that for about 25 years, going from my time at Clark Atlanta, kind of where I got my whole HBCU or love for HBCUs. And then from there on, went into a long career in education. Again, come from a family of educators. So it's definitely been something that's been very important, something I've been very passionate about for quite a while. So, excited to be here, just trying to do great things, getting these young people to where they need to be. So
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And of course, it is Teacher Appreciation Week. So thank you so much for what you're doing in the classrooms and for reaching out to all our students and just really opening up, doors for them and making these connections, which we'll jump into right now. Like we're talking about coding with culture. And, but before we do, I just want to hear a little bit more about your origin story. I'm always, intrigued with the people that I invite on the show. To me, it's like, they're educators. To me, they're like education superheroes. And just like every superhero, they have an origin story. And I always love to ask, what was your route or your road into education? So I know you mentioned you had come from a family of educators, but was it something that you always wanted to do?
it actually was. Strangely enough, I remember being very, very young. And, I always enjoyed my mom, and my mom and my Aunt Julie, my Aunt Jill, who were all educators. And I think the most, remarkable thing was they all taught in different spaces in education, but all of them were so passionate about what they did. They put them on. Jill taught in the physical education classroom, and she put on these fabulous gym shows. My Aunt Julie taught younger grades. the things she would do. I mean, I would love, when I wasn't in school, I wanted to go to school, you know what I'm saying, to see her teach. My mom taught middle grades math for a long time, and just, I mean, they were such, again, I didn't know what I was looking at that point, but it was so powerful. I think that it really sent a very important message. So, as a kid, I played school. Everything was always kind of kid oriented. When I was old enough to work at 16, I naturally went, to the Chicago Park District and became a counselor. So, and again, put that same kind of passion into, what I was doing, and just, it felt very natural. So I think it really was always kind of a life path. And I think that's why a lot of the, things we're dealing with, and I'll say that in education. I mean, do they affect me? Yeah. But I think, um, you know, being raised by those educators and having that impact, taught me this resilience. And again, I didn't know what I was learning, but I definitely know that I was learning it, and I was, benefiting from that kind of situation. So yeah, it was, I think, teaching or working with, young people, or again, I tell my students all the time, like, Mr. Hicks just does not have the patience to be sitting in one spot typing on a computer for 8 hours. Like, I just know I would not be successful in that realm. So, teaching allows me to really, of course, the relationships with the kids, but really just be creative. I think, it felt like a good fit. And, we've ridden the roller coaster, the goods and the bads and the in-betweens, but, nothing has been to the point where I feel like, it wasn't what I was meant to do. So, you know, here
That's
we are.
wonderful. That's wonderful. And so, like, and how long have you been in education now for?
Woo. So, okay. So we count, wow. So I guess we count my day camp days, I guess, which I guess was sort of education, looking at about, uh, 30 years, but in the classroom, in some respect, it'll be 21 this fall. So no, 22, 22. It was 21 this fall, 22 next fall.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Wow. That's definitely a career. This is my 16th year in education. I did 11 years in the classroom, but now transitioned to this new role. But like I said, it was slightly different path than yours. But once I got into education, definitely fell in love with it. So, and
Mhm.
again, I'm definitely excited about what we're talking about today, because we talked a little bit about it briefly prior to, getting the start of the show. Then I was talking to you that I didn't really hone in my skills as far as what STEM was, or even coding for that matter. And of course, the STEM activities that come with it, and the computational thinking, and, really opening up the minds of the students, until a little bit later in my career, probably in the last 4 years when I was in the classroom. And, but I'd like to hear a little bit about yourself. Where did this the spark or the passion for STEM and coding, when did that start for you? Or actually, how did it start, and what just, propelled you to continue with that?
So interestingly enough, I actually came to Atlanta, from a step coaching, job. So I was, hired by the Jack and Jill chapter here. It's an organization that works with teens. They do a big step show. So one of my cousins was a member of the chapter, came here to Atlanta, to do some consultation work with their team, and met with this principal. And she's like, oh my goodness, you do, I love what you're doing with your step team at this point in Chicago. The whole HBCU thing. She was a grad of Spelman. So, she's like, what would it get you to come here? So, I'm just thinking, this is normal networking jargon. I'm like, well, I tell you what, give me a contract and I'll come. She said, okay. And I'm gonna hold you to that. You cannot, I don't care if I call you. And I'm like, okay, we'll see. At this point I had signed my contract with my district, and, she said, hey, I have a computer science position. We, this whole focus in APS. Now they gave us this money. Are you interested? And I said, well, sure. This point, it was like July 30th. And I said, well, when does school start? She said, August 2nd. So I packed my car up, drove to Atlanta. And I think the thing was, the great part, the most beneficial piece was, there wasn't a predecessor for K-5 computer science. So it really wasn't a big thing. It was still a very kind of specialized thing at that point. You had your hour of code, but not a lot of kind of continuity as to what that looked like week to week. So the great part about that was, I really had to kind of, dig in, research, figure out, the bits and pieces to pull together this curriculum, to get these kids through. One thing I definitely was passionate about is, I knew I didn't want it to be, we're signing on to game sites every day and just kind of
Mm.
playing on the computer. And so from there, the next 6 years, it kind of clicked when I saw the growth, really kind of the equalizing factor of computer science, that I saw. I'll say computational thinking because I think it's a little bit bigger than just the coding and the computer science piece. But, um, really seeing that kids who struggled elsewhere really connected with it. When I moved to my new school or school before this one, we really had a very cultural, focus. And then we had the pandemic. So I was kind of forced to, again, go through the motions of figuring out best practices. How do I get these ideas across so that I'm, making good use of these kids' time and that we're being productive. And so, computer science, I think it grew me so much as an educator. It naturally, you know, it just kind of fit. And so I think that's what kind of made it the thing that just became my passion. I was really, of course, working with kids under different umbrellas was always a passion. So, whether it was arts or with stepping or but computer science, I just saw so many positive things come from that, and then with the virtual space, that's kind of where the, origin of coding with culture was seeing kids who even struggle in the in-person space, how computational thinking and these project-based learning, you know, units, lessons, or whatever that were coupled with this cultural piece, how they really, really flourished in that space. So I think it was just inspiring enough for me as an educator to, keep me wanting to do a little bit more. So,
Wow, that's wonderful, and kind of like what you described there is very similar to, again, like you said, you found that passion, you had to dig, you had to look for, you had to search for, but all with that mindset of creativity and innovativeness and also risk taking, because I'm pretty sure there was often times where maybe you had a lesson set up and maybe it didn't quite go as
mhm,
well as you wanted it, but that's why it's important, to build that kind of culture of risk taking
mhm,
within your classroom so your students can continue to grow. One thing that I'd like to mention that I love that you said was just making those connections to culture. And for myself, bringing the computational thinking experience to my students and living here in this area, language was a barrier as far as, we had a lot of students that were learning the language as students that were a little self-conscious because maybe they couldn't pronounce the words correctly. And then you had all different levels, but when I started the code club, and then when I started doing a lot more of the computational thinking using Scratch and within the
mhm,
classroom, what I loved about it is that everybody was on a level playing field as far as learning a new language. And although that language barrier, as far as what the voice, was still there, the students were just embracing and communicating with one another and sharing ideas where that didn't even matter anymore. They were just so focused on this new language. And it was something magical that happened there.
mhm.
Can you tell me just a little bit, maybe some of the experiences that you had, those aha moments, or like, as your students are working and learning, computational thinking with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that you quoted you used the perfect word. I think it's definitely those magical moments, where you realize it's kind of and I think it hits it crossroads at so many great positive moments because we know now that, when we look at 21st century college, and again, big emphasis on the word and career, there's so many different entry points for students now where if they are literate in this concept, you know what I'm saying? Again, not even just the coding, because that's just one very, very small, you know, part of the whole equation. But again, if kids are literate in this way of thinking, in this way of problem solving, it allows them so many different opportunities that cut out or at least minimize the factors that often inhibit them. Again, being able to afford to go to a 4-year institution, as much as I support and definitely, push the HBCU experience, realizing that some students, you know, financially, that's not the best or most responsible choice. So, but again, there's now very realistic pathways that if we give these children these tools, they can still be as successful, you know what I'm saying, and still exhibit and still experience some of that same success. And I think, you know, um, seeing that in kids, and like I said, in those lessons where, that was not your necessary intent. And again, I'd love for them to pick up the actual coding concepts. But again, to see those children experience that boost of self-esteem, or, you know, being able to realize that if they cannot, produce on a test, or maybe they don't function best in the fill in the blanks environment, that there is merit in the way that their brains work and the natural talents that they have. Because I mean, some of the things I've seen, as cliche as it sounds, have truly been brilliant. And these are kids that have struggled in other areas. And I think that those aha moments, that, positive energy, the growth you see from your kids, again, going back to your earlier question, that's what connects to that passion. Because, I've seen it in other, subject areas or academic disciplines, but, that computational thinking, because I think, again, you don't have to be the test taker. You don't have to be the kid that necessarily performs in those traditional ways. But I mean, if we look at the world, as we discussed earlier, the way it goes now, I don't really know if that's what we're looking at as a measure of success anymore. So I think, to see the uh confirmation, I think, for a lot of kids who normally don't get it otherwise, that they're good. I'm saying, you got some tools that you're ready to move with, and do some positive things with. And so, yeah, absolutely. I see it, every day.
No, that is wonderful. Like everything that you said
Yeah.
was so inspirational and motivating, because I recall seeing that when I was in the classroom with my
Yeah.
students, like you mentioned. And one thing that I love that you said is, like, we do have a lot of students that, may not excel in what the traditional
Amen.
methods of, like you said, like, A through A, B, C, or D, but it doesn't mean that they don't know the subject. I mean, one of the things was, even being able to assess my students. And now my principal probably, I mean, he's no longer my principal there, but I'm still friends with him. But one of the things that I would do is, like, I would have the students, that was their assessment. Their assessment was, hey, we're going to create the water cycle, in Scratch. And you're learning the computational aspect. They're being creative and in a non traditional A, B, C, D, E approach. But
Yep.
just the way that the kids were just so hyped and pumped and excited and collaborating with one another and asking questions. And what I loved about it, it was that equalizer, in the sense of, we had students with different, socioeconomic backgrounds,
Yep.
but that didn't even matter, because the kids were just so pumped with the subject that it was just amazing the way that they all came together. People that
Yep.
students that normally would not hang out during lunch or maybe at recess, now at recess they're like, hey, I did this, or they're with the Chromebooks, or or they come in during lunch, they're like, Mr. Mendoza, can we come in during lunch so we can work on this? And
But
I thought that it was just amazing, the
well,
relationships.
but I no, I agree 100%. And I think, that is I think the beautiful part about it is that, well, two things. And I think, I definitely want to speak to your point about what, you said about the, how the kids perform. But I think, if as educators, we really take opportunity to pause and say, okay, when as cliche as the term college and career ready has become, in 2022, and I think, I'm a big believer of everything that happens to kind of give us these messages, and so again, what did we learn from the pandemic? At the beginning, there was a lot of talk about reimagining education. And I think, as we said before, we came on air, when we had to transition from the one room schoolhouse into this model of education that served or fed the, industrial revolution, we, as much as we say, STEM, and we use these buzzwords, information age, 21st century learning, it's like, I think that pandemic was like, hey, here it is. We're not tiptoeing anymore, like, as uncomfortable, or, as much of the shift as it was from those, again, as we transition from the one room schoolhouse into these, K through 8, 9 through 12 system. I'm pretty sure that those teachers that were in the middle of that transition, it was rough. I mean, and I think we have to be very honest and own the fact of, our what are respectful tasks, what are respectful outcomes that we're asking these kids to do, because we're not where we were, even, in my 20-year span of education. So, if we're truly preparing those kids, these methods that are non-traditional success stories, they actually are becoming more and more traditional. I mean, I think if we really realistically look at what these kids are going to be asked to do, when they do, whether they choose, 4-year traditional college path or go into, technology or whatever other workforce, it's not the same. So I think we have to look at what our standards of success are. And again, computational thinking, all of those experiences, again, how many different ways can these kids express how they learn? Because again, it may not have been relevant when I was in 8th grade. Now, yeah, it is. Because they go to Google and make $91,000 a year on, knowing how to sit and talk to people and draw a diagram and make it make sense and, put all of these pieces together. Like, that's it. We're not in the worksheet society anymore. So
Yeah. No, no, no. Well said. Well said. Well, Coach, let's talk a little bit more about what you see. I mean, what was it, 2 semesters ago, I took a course and it was a special topics in STEM. And we were talking about STEM education and how here we're trying to really push for STEM. I mean, but it becomes sometimes more of a buzzword and people have a misconception of what STEM is. It's like, oh, well, here are these straws, create this. Here's the marshmallows and the toothpicks. Here, now we're doing STEM. And that's not what STEM is all about. There's kind of like that misconception of, yeah, we're trying to fit it in or calling ourselves a STEM school, but we're really not, affording those types of programs or doing it right, doing it the correct way. What is it that you've seen, or maybe just some ideas, coming from you? What should STEM look like, or maybe an example of maybe some of the work that you're doing, and or maybe let me rephrase that: what STEM should look like, and maybe what STEM is not.
okay, so I think, and I'll go in reverse. So I think with the not piece, only because I think you so eloquently pointed it out. So much of STEM is lost now, I think, in the, and again, and I don't think it necessarily has to be time based, but I see a lot of those things. We're gonna pull out some materials, we're gonna let kids build. Now, framed in the right perspective, or, making sure that, and I think the easiest way to do it is that there is and how it kind of uses my checkpoint, is there a tangible solution to a realistic problem? And then how do we go through, these steps? And I love the design thinking process versus engineering design process because it emphasizes the point of empathy. So we, and I think our kids can all benefit from, realistic ways of kind of saying, hey, let's frame ourselves as we go through this process. Is there a way for us to help somebody else? Because I mean, of course, in the world we're living in, we can definitely deal with more kind people. So, but just I think it's really that process. So even if it is a toothpick and marshmallow activity, our kids going through a actual defining a problem. Are we, and again, I think one of the key skills with this generation is, does it require some form of persistence? Is there room for kids to be able to test, to, iterate, to fail, and all those kind of things? And then how do you, in an age appropriate, grade appropriate way, make sure that they can see those steps? Because I think that's always the thing and again, kind of the trial and error of computer science and STEM, is that so much of the things are these really cool kind of field trip experiences. So the kids do this cool experience, something, phone blows out and, for 2 days. And then, 2 weeks later, you ask them, okay, what did we get from that? And if they can't at least say, hey, I tried, here's this algorithmic way of thinking through this solution, or, here's where I failed here, or here's how I, analyze feedback and made these steps. So, because again, these are the skills that, from the trends that I'm seeing, our kids are going to need to be able to have to be successful when they're, in college and definitely into career, where they are. So I think, again, if it's fun, I love a good time. So, we can incorporate movement and, as many different kind of things. But I think, if I had to kind of give a list of bullet points, definitely, I think the more authentic the problem, the better. So if there's a way to, and I don't think it necessarily has to always be a kind of save the world type situation, but, what is the takeaway from this? Are we looking at how to brainstorm an idea or how to collaborate? So I think just making it purposeful and naming that for the kids, but two, that they're going through some type of, design thinking process, and that they can see that and they can reflect on that. So
Yeah, that's good.
class is good. Just have to make it meaningful.
Yeah, and I think that's correct. You hit it right on the head. Oftentimes it's just more of do STEM for STEM's sake, just to say that we did it, or it's part of just a program. But one of the things too that we were talking about is like, what are some of the barriers or roadblocks that we see, in the class? And it was great because a lot of us, we've heard the word STEM or we've seen it, or maybe through our curriculum, or say, hey, we want to push more STEM. But really, some of the barriers have always been there hasn't been enough PD, to really understand, for the teachers, how to really implement this into a curriculum and how to go about it. Like you mentioned, some of the great ways is making it meaningful. You're solving a real world situation. One of the other barriers that we talked about was more for the student side is how do we encourage them to continue to follow in this track? Because oftentimes, there's not enough. We always say there aren't enough women in STEM. Maybe the boys, they go into STEM a little bit longer. And so it's that representation of showing students and saying, hey, we have a female chemist, and look at what they're doing, and making it relevant to them so they can say, hey, I can do that. That person looks like me. That person, I could be that in the future. So that's something that I know that we've seen and we've discussed here during our course, as far as barriers of entry. What are your thoughts on that? What can we do better to help encourage our students to stay within that path?
Well, I think it's three. I think it's a couple of different angles we can look at that. I think that's part of my big push for HBCUs. I think specifically for Africa. Well, and I will say because HBCUs traditionally were created to serve African American students, but I think it also benefits a diverse group of students who benefit from certain learning styles or different environments. But that's one piece. So I think the thing I love about it is it gives kids really really cool subject matter to create these projects around, but it also gives a very realistic path of schools where we're already asking women of color or African, whatever population you may speak of, to kind of take this risk. So now at least I want to make sure that we are presenting a very realistic path that by design is built for your success. So if you're going to take the plunge and try some of these STEM fields that traditionally there are not a large people at the other end waiting for you, at least let's put you in an environment where your professors, everybody at an HBCU, whatever their background, we know what they're pretty much, we can assume, are there for your success and will mentor you and pour into you and build that confidence that's needed to trailblaze into careers that, again, why we even have a term that's called the digital divide. But second, I think is providing that realistic subject matter, and I think one of the things that I saw, especially again, navigating that K-5 space when it really wasn't a set scope and sequence, was there's a lot of flash, and I love the hour of code and what it did to get kids excited. But the problem was, and where I saw in my kids who did really well with the various block-based coding or tutorial-based situations, was once it became JavaScript or Python or CS or C plus or any of the languages, and it wasn't this gamified experience, they were my brightest coders for 5 years, but there wasn't a realistic kind of, okay, let's pull the Band-Aid off a little slow, to get you ready. Because again, as meaningful as that spark is, if it's not sustainable, then we're not really addressing the problem, right? Because we don't need kids to get excited. We do but we need that excitement to parallel into this pathway and getting prepared to be able to do what you need to do. So I think that's kind of where the computational thought piece comes in, and again, really, because again, something that gets kids from that fun, hey, let's get you excited about coding, into, okay, if this is something you want to pursue, now let's start getting your tool belt ready so that you're ready to perform, when you need to. So I think it's, again, providing that representation, but also backing that up with, rigorous and yes, culturally relevant so the kids can connect and all of those things. But there has to be some quality substance there because again, we can get them excited, but if they're not, once they leave their favorite teacher or the fun teacher that did it this way, you know, and I think, that was my thing being in that K-5 space is my kids was like, oh yeah, Coach Hicks all day. I'll code. Yep. Call me whenever he says. And then they would get to the middle school like, mm-mm.
Yeah. All right. Well, Coach, let's talk a little bit more about your program, that we're talking about, coding with culture. Where did this come about, the idea about this? And tell us a little bit more. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and also share the screen here. And then that
Okay.
way people can, I did share the link to the website. And then that way you can talk to us a little bit more about this.
Okay, so this actually grew. So interestingly enough, I have one coding with culture grew from one of the students I worked with at my former school, Kendesi, when I was teaching here in charter school in Atlanta. And a student who really just, in person, loved computer science and loved Coach Hicks, but really just kind of struggled to um, get it, And so we moved into the COVID space, of course, not, any choice of ours, but um, this kid was doing amazing things, and I mean, just really, really connecting with the HBCU stuff because I'm like, okay, well, I have to kind of make this fun now. Like they're not, they're choosing whether or not to sign in. Like I do want them to get some, piece of the puzzle, but I'm an elective. So now I'm taking another step back. And so seeing this young man's, growth, I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is, now that I am home, is there a way that I can, get this to more people? So just kind of piloted a couple different, one-on-one classes, friends of mine who had gone to, I attended CAU or knew from, some of the neighboring HBCUs, signed their kids up and we, I developed curriculum as it came. And so it's still very, I mean, and decidedly so, I think a very roots organization. I'm more about, and I think that's one of the things about being in the classroom as long as I have is that it's so much more about authenticity to me. So, we're not the biggest or we're not, coding with 9,000 kids, but I want to make sure that, the kids that we are impacting are getting, again, those things I just said, this rigor. And again, they're able to take something away from, even if it's not coding, if it's, just I've learned how to, my mind has been open to HBCUs or like you said, the fact there are scientists of color. So, I mean, there's so many different ways it impacts kids. But again, I saw the impact it had. I mean, the literal turn. I mean, 180 for this kid, and I'm like, okay, Hicks, this might be another way that you can kind of push this message of excellence and get these kids prepared for the next step. So yeah, it was it came up overnight, I mean, I've always loved, from the one thing that's always kind of been the consistent with my kids is just HBCUs because I know how much it poured into who I am as an educator, as an adult, as a person. And I just see how it really or saw the way that it can impact young people. So that was the thing that, went from Coach Hicks to the Title I, reading interventionalist and step coach to, uh athletic director to, now computer science STEM teacher. So yeah, coding with culture really was just a kind of a natural ebb and flow, something I really, which is why I think I do it without, I mean, it's a lot sometimes, but it never feels overwhelming because it's something that I truly, truly love to do. And I love the impact that it has on, the young people that I work with. So.
And that is so wonderful. So wonderful. So if you can tell us maybe just a little bit also as far as your program is concerned. I know you mentioned, hour of code and so on. Now, what other technology is it that you incorporate? Are there any specific languages or do the students get a little taste of everything, during the, your programs?
Well, it varies. We do a couple of things. I try to, so the one-on-ones, of course, are a little bit more family based. So we do a consultation, kind of see where the kids are. Because I mean, again, age really it's interesting to prove how how, again, the great equalizer we talked about before. Because I've had fourth graders that are like, no, Coach Hicks, I'm trying to do Java. I'm trying to, really kind of get into deep coding. So I think it really, really depends. On the one-on-ones, we try to offer because as far as instruction wise, it is just me. I'm still trying to figure out ways to teach other people how to do what I do. So But I like it because it means I still have my hand on, my product. And I think right now, I'm fortunate to be in a place where that can still be, the driving force behind what I do. So all that to say, with the classes, I kind of go with that project-based learning. We look more kind of at the unit, if that makes sense, and then see how many different types of technology. So yeah, we might do a little bit of the coding. The kids do the design your HBCU. They work with um, Google Sites. For the younger kids, they get just an example. But again, even that website, ties in. We talk about graphic design that ties, into the psychology of color and why we use the fonts that we use. So there's a lot of, and I really try to make sure I impose or kind of offer as many different entry points into this design thinking, computational thinking world. So, those our camps or our classes really kind of have a more I guess, platform approach. So, we definitely do a lot of the scratch. Scratch is definitely a go-to for just makes my life very easy because they can
Yeah.
create, it just offers so much room for kids to create digital artifacts really about anything, and I love the tutorial as the kind of, guided practice if you want to break it into lesson terms. But I look for those, things like, I mean, the Google Suite, of course, is nice. I've recently fallen in love with the Minecraft for education. So there's so many cool little, tools, but I think using them as standalones as far as like, getting the kids used to it, but I think it's so much richer when again, you kind of think theme again. So kind of going back to that project based learning and then, okay, how do I incorporate Scratch and, how can we build a website and how can we incorporate, is there a way to do, incorporate physical computing into this? And then I think that's really when you send the message home to kids. And again, going back to that, these are these project teams that we're sending our kids at some point. Definitely, I mean, we see it now, but imagine 10 years from now, you know, those are the skills they're going to have to be able to, that will be the most valuable for them, I think.
Yeah. No, and I agree with you 100%. As educators such as yourself and myself and many others that are out there, we definitely have to be forward thinkers as far as what the future of education is, once our students are, how are we prepping them from high school to whatever level they're going to next? And also for the future of work. I mean, now, coding, a lot of programming, a lot of talk around Web3 and the way that we are going to be connected with people, things, places, and of course the tech and everything. So websites are looking different. They're definitely going to need a lot of programmers. You're seeing a lot of that. You're seeing a lot of the augmented and virtual reality.
Mhm.
So definitely the future is bright. But if we can get the students to learn these skills at an early age and continuous, not just, well, you have that one teacher that does it in, let's say in fifth grade, and then they don't see anything from sixth grade, seventh, and then no, well, okay, maybe there's another teacher that will do it in eighth grade, and then, get into robotics in high school. We definitely need to have some of that consistency. Before we kind of wrap up and our show and everything, this has been an amazing conversation, and I'm really excited.
Absolutely.
I've taken so much from this, but I wanted to ask you, for any school districts that are out there that how or what advice would you give them on a way that they can incorporate culture into either computational thinking courses, either if they're doing coding or even in STEM instruction? What would be some of the ways that you would, say, hey, here's some simple ways to implement this?
I think, and I tell teachers, the few times I've been fortunate enough to speak with teachers in the training space, I always tell them, authenticity. I mean, HBCUs are my thing. And I mean, if you're looking for inspiration, I would love, of course, I'd love to share the wealth. But, I think looking at number one, the teachers, some of those passions. I mean, there's so many different things and interests and, genres of things that fit into or ways that you can demonstrate computational thinking or, that put it into the how of the lesson or the project. So I think, the teacher passion is a great place to begin, but also surveying those students, and in an age appropriate way and figuring out, how do we poll them? Because again, this is a kind of very abstract concept. So I think when are again very tangible, realistic real life connections, it makes the kids, makes it make sense, for the kids as to why you're asking me to try this thing. So why do I care that variables or loops or that algorithms for, even less, why do I care that they exist? But I think when we talk about and connecting it to to not necessarily just problems, but interests or topics, um, that are passionate to the teacher, or, if there's a way to connect the, state curriculum or district curriculum to a passion that you can, gauge from your students. And I think, the win is, it's win-win. But if we have to err on the side of either one, I would definitely say, look for those realistic, when we say real life, things that are important to, the school culture, the culture of kids that you teach. But again, I think teacher passion is a great way, because I have a lot of kids who have never heard about HBCUs, but because, it's something that I'm passionate about as an educator, I'm able to, teach it, talk about it, you know, present it in a way that the kids get excited about it. So, I think it's several different ways to even approach that. But I think if in a tiered method, I would definitely say the student interest trumps all. Because there have been, like, my kids love the music production with ear sketch. So that has been a constant in my classroom. I wasn't familiar with it, but because they were so passionate about it, things they created from that were so powerful, it was worthwhile in that project, or excuse me, connecting computational thinking, that piece.
And I love what you just said right there. You weren't too familiar with this platform, but the students were. And a lot of times that's sometimes the best way to learn is you're learning from your students. And some of them are already the subject matter expert on a specific platform, and we are just wowed by them. And I always, that's what I love, that, with the little that I knew and I shared it with students. And then they would, oh, well, look, did you know that you can do this and do this? By the end of the day, when I had my fourth block, I looked like the subject matter expert, but it was because I was learning from my students.
Let me tell you, I love. I so believe in working smarter, not harder. I tell my middle school kids, I tweeted about that today. We were working on their design an HBCU thing in Minecraft for our arts night this week. And so, I came in, of course, because, I am actually the adult that's paid to be there, and be in charge. But, they love the, roll of the eyes. Oh, coach it. We got it. We don't know. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Meanwhile, I try to eavesdrop on the conversation so I can at least, sound like I know what I'm talking about. But I think, to me, that's been the most powerful part about teaching science, is that I don't have to be the expert. And like I said, that's what these kids are going into. We're not pushing them into factories where there's this, boss that is overseeing every, repeating this task for 8 hours. No, you are in this think space where there might be a project leader, but he's not going, okay, this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3. It's this continual, collaborative process. And I think so, again, if we're preparing, what are we preparing our students for, and how do we reverse engineer our educational process, so to speak? So I think that's hits the nail on the head as to why computer science and STEM was it for me.
Oh, no, I agree with you 100%. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, Coach. I've loved learning from you and just seeing your passion and hearing about all the work that you're doing. And in a lot of ways, my experience, mirrors a little bit of yours. And I'm just excited that you're out there and you're pushing this, and students are growing and they're learning, and you're doing something amazing for them, and being able to open up doors that they don't know yet that may not be open for them. But as of right now, those doors are definitely going to be open for them. So thank you so
And
much.
if not, build them.
Yeah.
They're not open, build them.
Yes. So thank you so much for what you're doing. But before we wrap up, I always love to ask these last 3 questions to all my guests. So first question would be, Coach Hicks, if you can have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Oh, okay. So am I including this billboard, or is it just a billboard?
Well, it's just a billboard. I mean, whatever you want on it. So it's free reign. So
Oh, that's a good one. I don't know. I think I would probably do a HBCU of the month. I would do it free of charge. So I would donate it to a different, probably a lesser known, a smaller HBCU. But do make it free of charge so they could advertise. And I put it from
Okay.
like my high school. Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Great answer. I love it. All right. So, Coach Hicks, this one's a difficult question for a lot of my guests, but you know how kryptonite makes Superman weak. It seriously weakens him. At this point in time, or maybe in the past, or currently, what would you say is your edu kryptonite?
Oh, so like that makes okay. So that I'm oh,
Yeah, it just makes you weak. Yeah, I mean, you either hear it and you just like cringe and you're like, no, or, just, just,
okay. Oh, you about to get me in trouble. Okay, so think I think for me it's just when we take the joy out of education, like specifically for children of color, like I hate the fact that we don't want children of color to experience joy. 6-year-olds are not quiet. They don't stand with both feet on the line. They don't, and I don't see any merit in that. One thing I love about my classroom, my children are happy. We have fun. They get on my nerves sometimes. I love them, but they're 6, and I want them to be authentically 6. And I think one of the things that I notice in teaching in diverse environments is that we joy. We in a lot of our most troubled schools, it's like they're babies. They don't let's let them dance and move around and make a little bit of noise. We can still teach them, and there's a way to still hold them accountable for some things. But I hate when we don't allow children to experience joy.
Excellent. Excellent. Great answer. Appreciate that. And the last question, Coach Hicks, if this was your podcast, I hinted maybe someday we'll have a podcast. But if this was your podcast and I was your guest, what would be one question you would like to ask me as your guest?
Oh, that's a good one. I think my question would be if you had to choose one grade level and/or subject to teach, but you had to teach it for the rest of your life, what would you teach and why? What would it be and why?
Ooh, okay. I would definitely be teaching 5th grade and I would love to be teaching science and mathematics. I started off as a math teacher and been a math teacher like all my life. And I learned some new things from our current content specialist in our district that just blew my mind, and actually doing it hands-on, the use of manipulatives and of course not going through a traditional college of ed or even a math major, but going through business school and then finding a pivot and falling into math just because I had enough credits. Well, kind of we were talking about our conversation. I taught math the way I learned math, but I can't teach my students the way that I learned now. So definitely implementing the hands-on. I would definitely be that one teacher that would check out the Chromebook cart each and every day. And we
Yep.
would definitely be coding for math. We would be coding for science. And we would definitely bring all of that together and just having one of those classrooms where,
Yep.
you are allowed to be creative, take risks, and still be within our sandbox of meeting our curriculum. And I would definitely be very happy with that.
Okay. I think that's a solid answer. Yes, I love we did a Disney theme park unit on area, and I mean the stuff these kids created. And I was actually in Minecraft for education, and the stuff. I mean, I was blown away. And like I said, I mean, kids who were probably if you put that same problem on a word, they're like, "Coach Hicks, what are you talking about?" But they were able to, I mean, come up with some things, and it's just like again, though, you said it best. Those aha moments.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Coach Hicks, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your wisdom, your knowledge,
Thank
everything that
you.
you
It's been
shared,
good to you.
your passion. And it was just an amazing conversation, very fruitful. I am very pumped. And thank you so much for everything that you're doing. And to all our viewers, all our listeners, thank you so much for making my EdTech life what it is today. Thank you so much for all of your continual support. So please make sure that you visit our website at www.myedtech.life give us a review. Check out all the amazing episodes that we've had, and we're going to continue to bring you some more amazing episodes. And again, reach out to us if you're ever interested on being a guest. Reach out to us. We can definitely make it happen. And I appreciate every single one of you. And guys, always remember, until next time, don't forget, always stay techie, my friends.